and it's something that's not in isolation, it's linked with other things, whereas different diagnosis or labels that I've been given, you could see them as separate entities, but actually they're all linked. Some of my OCD routines, as I call them, sort of like minimising them, as like I do, are linked with my eating disorder and are based on calorie burn or keeping active and that kind of thing. But some of the routines that I have are not linked to that and are linked to maybe feeling insecure about myself. My alarm clock one, it's a weird routine, it's illogical, it doesn't make sense, but it's about me worrying that I'm not going to get up in the morning and I'm going to be late and then I'll look stupid and then I'll be embarrassed and those kind of things. So
what are you going to be late for?
I don't know. And this is where the illogical side of it comes in. The one with my alarm clocks is I have a certain number of alarm clocks. It's gone down. I used to have 9. Then I had 7. At the minute I'm working with 3.
Yeah.
And it's how I check them in a certain way. So it's in 3s or in 7s. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, break. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3,
so you
1, 2,
refer
3.
to 3 as the safe number?
Yeah, and before, for I don't know why things suddenly changed, but when I was working and I was more stressed about being on time for things, it was 7, the number 7, and I had 9 alarm clocks. Like I say, now I've got 3, but if I have got something the next day, like I'm taking my mum to an appointment or something like that, the anxiety will come and I'll think I need more, because what if the battery goes in that one? What if the battery goes in that one? What if I have a power cut in the middle of the night? So and things like that add to the anxiety.
Do they add to the anxiety, or are they the anxiety? Do you see what I mean? Because you've got anxiety, so you aren't anxiety and you aren't OCD. They're just labels that get put on. So what we do is, and what this is a fine example of, is in our egoic thinking, it's a constant story that people have. So we have this story all the time. That's the addiction. It's an addiction story. It's constantly tells you the same thing over and over again. Sometimes it might change because the ego is unstable. So ultimately, that's what the problem is that you suffering from not being safe because you weren't safe.
Yeah.
So it already happened. And because you weren't safe then, a story developed from that. So you decided certain numbers were the safe ones. So in the made up story, that number 3 is the safe, and that you're going to be late and you fear going to be late and you fear going to be judged. So these things that you fear have already happened. And because they've already happened, it's like rewinding it almost, as if you're trying to avoid it from happening, but it's already happened. And then it leads you to an empty room, because it's like, well, what are you going to be late for? I don't know. So then you get led to nothingness. Nothing. I'm not going to be late. So
that's why it's illogical to me as well when I explain. It's like, it doesn't make sense.
But so you're doing the think, feel and act. You're thinking it, feeling anxiety, and you're acting on a made up story that's actually in your head. You know, when the being asleep in the daydream, this is your daydream. Yeah. So you're missing out on today because you're in this daydream story. What keeps you in it? Knowing about that this is a daydream and it's not true. So the feeling, you know, if we want to attach a story, because we're storytellers, don't we? So if we have a feeling and we have an awful feeling, we think, oh wow, why is that there? And then we try, you know, search the filing cabinet to find out, oh, it's there because of that story. And we can find a negative story to match. So then we can then say, oh, well, it's true then, because I've just found a story to match. And that's what's happening with you with anxiety. Something happened, you know, that you felt anxiety from an experience. You felt anxiety, and from that you've been telling a story to feel anxiety, to kind of keep the anxiety.
I can understand that in relation to the clocks and how I do that, and how it comes from the anxiety of not wanting to be judged and not wanting to be late and do things right and things. But some of the routines and things that I have, they seem very illogical, but they're very powerful in that I feel as if I don't have any choice to do them, and like I say, they're very dominating in my life, and there's so many of them. It's certain ways that I pull my curtains, or certain places in my house where I put things, or I've got to have certain things out, or my bag ready for the next day by a certain time, or I've got to, check things in a certain way, pull my curtains in a certain way, be in the house at a certain time, be out of the house at a certain time. Some of it, I don't understand how it's linked to being safe or whatever, because it's pulling my curtains in a certain way.
What's going to happen if you don't?
I don't know. It's just the anxiety and that I feel that need, and I can't settle till I've met that need to do
that's
it.
You feel anxiety.
Right.
So then you say you don't know the link to feeling safe, but if you're feeling anxious, you want to calm the anxiety down so you feel safe.
But why over some blooming curtains?
Because you've told yourself a story.
Right.
So you've told yourself, you've told yourself a story, and then it keeps you in a tiny box, in like a little prison. And the prison is, you've made it really nice and cosy. It's got cushions in, although it's still your prison.
It feels like a prison.
Exactly. So you're saying, although this is a prison, it keeps me safe if I do these actions that are nonsense. If you think about the world that we live in, it's a prison in there. It's a prison where, we're told we need these rules because people will go haywire. Well, no, they won't, because they do anyway. So we don't really need, we're human beings, but we get told to be human doing. So we get our humanness taken away from us. So as soon as we're when we're born, we get the label, like I've said before, there you go, that's your label. And then from our experiences and what people tell us about us, we build a character and say that's who I am. So if I have an experience where it was an awful experience growing up, then my interpretation of that must be that I'm an awful person. Yeah, I deserve to be treated like that. So not that it must be, but usually it's what you interpret about yourself. So what you believe about yourself, then for the rest of your life you make true, unless you change your mind. So from your experience, you've built more rules as well as the ones. Just because we normalise things in society doesn't mean it's healthy. Because the story's constantly going on in society from people's minds, and we're abiding by the stories. Like when Hitler had a story that went on, he then projected it onto the world, didn't he? And so, then other people do with isms like sexism and racism, that, they're superior. Well, they're actually not. It's not superiority, it's illness. And so they want to put their hatred onto someone else and then tell themselves that they're better than that person because they can rape them, murder them, torture them, and do all these things to them. It's like, that doesn't make you better, that makes you a sociopath or a psychopath. But that's what, that's what people tell themselves if they want to control another human being. So, but we're controlled anyway. That's why we have laws to control us, and then we have policies to control us, and then you go to work and you're controlled, and when you go to school you're controlled. So you go to a prison, and then you go to another prison, where the first one for children is, you can't go to the toilet when you want, you've got to ask, you eat at the time, the second you leave you have to go, you don't really want to go, and your humanness begins to get taken away, because there's a structure here on this planet, and this is the one you're going to live by.
It's like I've given myself an extra prison, an extra structure, because every part of my day is fixed with routines. So when I always say I've never got any plans, I never plan ahead, But if you said in 3 months on a Tuesday at 4 o'clock, I know where I should be on three months on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, because I'm always doing that at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
I guess those are my plans. And if you said, do you want to go on holiday next year? It's like, no, dear God, you know, it's
like that.
I cannot envisage, although the routines have changed, I cannot envisage being okay not doing them. And maybe that's something that I need to start visualising. Because at the minute it seems too frightening to not do any of these things.
But
even though I don't like them.
Exactly, and it's these things that are keeping you in the fear as well. So the very thing that you're keeping you safe, it's actually not keeping you safe at all. It's just keeping you doing this.
Yeah, I think I've had an okay day when I've done everything and everything's ticked off, and it's like, I don't know if it is that sense of, right, if I'm doing these things, I know nothing's going to hurt me. I know I'm going to be safe. I know I'm going to be okay. Nothing can get in and I'm in control. I don't know if there's elements of that in there as well.
It is control. It's not somebody getting in. It's stopping you from getting out.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? It's keeping you a prisoner in it. You said, when I've done this, then I can feel safe. Nobody's going to get in. It's like, no, they already did. You're not letting yourself out. I can't go out. I can't go on holiday. I can't be free. I can't have freedom because I'm safe in this prison. You know, and quite often we get the message as well from you know, those around us. So it's like, if you're doing something, you just need some routine. Just go get a job, get some routine, get somebody else telling you what to do all the time. Have the same pattern, have the same routine like everybody else does. There's no one says you just need some freedom from this. You don't. I rarely hear that. You need some freedom from this program that we're in. No one says that. It's like, you need to do that. You just need to. There's always something we need to be doing rather than just be a being. Do you see what I mean? Rather than stepping out the box and having freedom. Even when you go on holiday, when you're working, somebody's going to tell you, you know, how long you've got. And so it's like that. So it's like, that's the world that you've taken in. Because we get all these things from somewhere, and then we do even more with them. Do you see what I mean? So as we spoke about before, like your eating disorder, is that when you looked at the pattern of your family's eating, you can see why you eat the way you do, and the connections to that as why you chose an eating disorder. And so it's that you know, majority of people have OCD, they just don't realise it because it's not causing them a problem. And it's quite a big thing. In fact, it is a big thing because these stories that we have anyway rule our lives. When we believe the egoic thinking, like people believe they're not good enough, that rules their life, believing that they're not good enough. So they won't step out of their prison. They'll think, I can't do that, so I'm not going to bother because I'm not good enough. Or I can't have that, so I'm not going to bother.
When you're talking, it reminds me of that. I've probably seen it on the television or something, and we've mentioned it before. When you have caged chickens and hens, but you leave the door open and they don't come out because they feel safe in that horrible, constrictive cage sort of thing. But they're used to it, and that's safety net.
Because
I think
they've been programmed not to come out, and that's the same for us. It's like, you know, we're being programmed in it's like a cult. And you think, when you watch cults, you think, I wouldn't do that. It's like, actually, you already do. Yeah. You're already programmed with the things.
And I think, for me, looking back, with the help of therapy, it's been there in lots of shapes and forms, differently. It's morphed into different things, but it's been there since I was a child. That element of, it's something that I can be, well, I don't feel as if I'm in charge of it. But it's something that's protective in a way, but even though I don't like it.
Yeah, so it's a story that you have that it's protecting you.
Yeah.
But what if you challenge that?
Yeah, I'm going to say, I don't know why putting my curtains in a certain way is deemed as it's going to protect me from somebody hurting me or something, so which again is logic. It's illogical.
Logic says to you, actually that makes no sense, because the ego is a nonsense. It makes no sense for anyone. And it never apologises. It lies all the time and never apologises. Says, do you know, I got that wrong. because it's not actually even talking to you. So, and when you say I'm not in charge of it, it's like it's not you. You wouldn't get up and say, tomorrow this is what I'm going to tell myself all day long. You wouldn't get up and logically say that. Even your own logic might say it doesn't make no sense. Who is that that's saying that then? There's only one of you. Remember I said there's only one of you in there. Who's saying these things to you? You aren't this program. You are not this program. You're a human being that's been programmed with something because the brain's recorded it. It's recorded all that you've been taught from the world. And it's recorded, you know, your experiences. And then you've made a story about yourself. And other people have made a story about you. And they've made a story about themselves. And someone else made a story about them. So we got a story given to us. It's like we're a human being, but we get these stories of you're a female, so we get that label. And so we're getting buried now in these labels. So you're a female, there's your name, you know, this is what your role is in on the planet as a female. These are the kind of clothes that you're going to wear as a female, you know, because majority of people, this is how females have their hair. So we build characters, you know, about ourselves, about who we are. But are you really that?
No.
Because all these, so we shift into characters, and then you're a daughter, or, you know, or an auntie or a sister, and then we get all of these as well. So it's like, but ultimately there's one of you that remains the same all the time, and it's none of these characters that we've been told. If you were in a world where you were born, nobody gave you a label, and it was just you, a human being having experiences, then do you think that you'd have OCD if there were none of those stories? That's it, because we don't know about the things that we don't know about. We only know about those when they're introduced to us. So it's like babies have no-isms when they're born. They don't know about all these awful stories that we have with each other in this world of, you know, kindness and abuse. It's like heaven and hell. All these stories that we have are put on to us. They're given to us, the unwanted gifts. And then after a while we become the story, but we're not. We miss out on who we are.
Yeah, it becomes the be all and end all of everything. And it filters. I was trying to explain it to somebody yesterday. It's not for me, it's not a standalone thing, and then my eating disorder is a standalone thing, and the other labels that I've been given, and I tried to explain it. The only way I could think of was a multi-bag of crisps. The labels I've been given are all the little packets in the multi-bag, but actually open them all up and put them all together and shake the bag. That's who I am. Instead of
so
little individual packets, all of it's morphed and changed and affected into it, because a lot of my routines are nonsensical in that, like the curtains and this, that and other things in certain places and stuff around the house, but a lot of them are based on exercise, calorie burn and that kind of thing, which are linked to two other labels for addiction, exercise addiction, but also...
What's it like to have all these labels?
I don't feel that I have them. I don't feel that I'm...
Well, they're just made up anyway. Yeah, they're made up stories out there in the
I
world.
use them to try and explain or unexplain things, because the OCD has got elements of just OCD, but it's got linked with exercise addiction, which is also linked with an eating disorder. And
so what if they're all normal reactions?
Yeah.
To an abnormal situation.
Well, that's what I said yesterday. I said to people, I could give you a list of all the diagnoses that people have given me, but really, I could just cross all them out and say I am not any of them.
Well, you're not
I am
really.
Responsive. I have responded to my experiences and how I've interacted with the world and how I perceive the world interacting with me. So actually, I don't need all those labels. I could just say, I'm responding. That would be the label that I've got.
You're responding to an experience of
and
abuse.
people do try and put things in little packets. So the little packets of crisps, they think they're easier to manage. Because I remember once when I was having an appointment with somebody about my eating disorder, I wanted to talk about how my exercise was increasing and how, which is linked to the OCD at doing certain things at a certain time, and which is linked to calorie burn, which is linked to an addiction. She went, we're not here to talk about that. It's like, well, they're linked. You can't put things neatly in little bags of crisps. It doesn't work.
It's like that sounds to me like you've got, say that you've got a really swollen arm, and you go to the doctors, and the doctor says, oh, can I have what part of your body swollen? It's my arm, it's really painful. Well, can you just bring your arm in and leave the rest of your body outside? It's like asking someone, that's how it sounds to me. It doesn't make sense that, well, the whole of me is going to have to come. My body, my mind, my spirit, everything's going to have to come. But no, we don't deal with that here. We just deal with arms. We just want your arm, we don't want you. It's like that sounds like that, because if you're reacting normally to an abnormal situation that you experienced and went through as a child, all of it's the reaction. So because all of you is impacted by it. So how do you manage that with, I have to take this bit of me here and this bit over here and this reaction here and that reaction there and that reaction there?
Initially, before therapy, I went along with that, and for many years I just talked about my eating, and what happened in my experience is the little bags of crisps, or the separate little labels that you're given, it was a matter of which is most severe, which is the priority, we'll deal with that one. So we'll deal with depression, forget the rest. Oh dear, your eating disorder's got worse, we'll deal with your eating disorder, forget the depression, forget the OCD, forget everything. And it was sort of like a hierarchical thing about only dealing with one issue at a time, and by this person will deal with this, oh we're talking about something else, this person will deal with this. Rather, it wasn't till I started having therapy where I was seen as that multi-pack that I was experiencing and responding to, rather than it being me.
So did you get all your multi-pack? Did you have places to go for all of them?
No, it was just a priority one. Like, nobody ever talked to me about my OCD because it was on the list, but it never got to the priority because my eating disorder and became so severe that I needed physical help because I had multi-organ failure and stuff like that. So it never got to the top in that medical model, diagnosis model thing. It wasn't till through therapy where talking about me as a whole and how I live my life and how I respond to things, and it isn't, even though we've done it today, we're going to talk about OCD. In therapy, it isn't, let's talk about OCD this session. Next session, we're going to talk about eating disorders. It's about collectively how you experience the world and mirror the world, and also my response to how I see the world and how the world sees me and that kind of thing. So yeah, looked at it differently over time. And one of the things that I am guilty of, that I know I need to stop doing, and it's only like when I talk like this with you that I think, yeah, I'm still doing it. I minimise it, I belittle it, I make fun of it. I go along and don't challenge when other people do make fun of it. You hear people say, oh, I'm a bit OCD because they like the cleaning, and that kind of thing. There's that fantasy that OCD is something to do with you like in a tiny house or that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's like being a little bit pregnant.
Yeah, you can't be. You've either got OCD or you aren't. You're either pregnant or you're not. And it's often in society that it's trivialised, belittled, minimised, and I know I do that myself.
Why do you do it?
I think it's a way of getting through. Not a helpful way of getting through, but I think I've got to this stage in my life by minimising and belittling things and normalising, because when I get in touch with the severity of what I've experienced and the impact that it's had on me, I go to pieces and cannot function, and I'm very, very suicidal and want to end things, and actively suicidal, which is, I know, something else we can talk about in another session, because again, that's another complex issue. But I don't want to exist all the time, every day. I don't want to exist. But when I really connect with the severity and emotionally connect with the severity of my experiences and how I've lived my life, it does become quite overwhelming. So I guess me being able to minimise and normalise things have helped me stay alive, sort of thing. Not in a healthy way, but carry on existing.
Do you think part of your environment is, minimised, not just the OCD, but minimised sexual abuse and minimised things such as, with sentencing or stuff like that, compared to your sentence of your experience of it?
Yeah.
Do you think
lots of ways, in my social circle, in my working environment, in the media around me, I see it
quite often
minimised.
Victims will get blamed as well, that they're just doing it for money, or they're doing it for this, and then it becomes where the perpetrators, depending on who they are as well, it's like that can often depend on.
It becomes about them.
It does. They become, there's no real comeback for them almost, depending on who they are and what the background is. There's almost no real comeback for them, and then it gets put onto the victims. So the victims get get punished again, because of people just don't want to know. So it's what suits them.
Or fed up of it, or it's in the past.
Or they'll say, they wouldn't do that. It doesn't. It doesn't. But it's there. But it's like, well, you weren't there, so how can you have? How can you say that if you weren't there? Because you weren't there. You're just saying it because that person's in that position and that person's in their position. So you're just treating them like fodder.
And even though I'm learning about how I am and why I'm like how I am, doesn't mean to say that I can just stop it. Which is, again, is a fantasy that some people have. And bless her, my mum will say, it's ruined your life so much, don't let it ruin anymore. As if I can go, okay, I'm not going to have any of these issues that's how I've lived my life since I was very little. I've got, for me, and it was interesting that I was speaking to somebody about trauma, and I said you can't put all trauma together, because when you have trauma as a young child, that's when you're developing. When you have trauma in adulthood, you've got that foundation to fall back on, that solid foundation. When you're a child, I've got nothing to go back to. I've got nothing to recover to. I've got no memory of who I was and how life is without this experience.
I think the other thing is how what's different as well is that if things get taken more seriously for adults. So if an adult hit another adult, the police would come out and sort it out, and potentially they'd get locked away or go to court. But if an adult hits a child, it doesn't seem to be, strong as a sentence if it was an adult. If an adult rapes, say if he went around raping lots of women or lots of men, it would be televised that there's a rapist. But if there's a paedophile, that's going to be after children, then there's barely any warning of that. So it is minimised, isn't it? As if children's lives don't matter as much as the adult's life matters. As if this human being is any less than this human being. And the only ones that decide that is human beings. And it's like, who are they to decide who's more important than than who?
One of the things that is just flashed up in my mind, I was watching something on the television, and it was about a paedophile who had been sentenced, and the two people who that he'd abused are adults now. And one of the things that they were saying, which messed my head up a little bit, was they said, I'm glad we spoke out, because if not, other people could have been at risk, and that would have been our fault. And it's like, why are you saying it's your fault? You're not actually doing anything. But that those two men had taken on that I spoke out, and so that I protected other people, because if I hadn't have spoken out, they could have done it to loads. Where's giving the responsibility to that person who was doing it?
Exactly, and that's how, and even the victim takes on that responsibility.
Yeah, I felt that quite shocking. I felt
it
like
is,
shouting at the
yeah,
TV. It's
yeah.
not to do with you. Give that
Then
person the responsibility.
Exactly, and as well, it's what you've just said about, when people are shown, or it's televised that this person's a paedophile, quite often the victims then, after a time, will say, they were just doing it for money, or they're just doing it, they get attacked or things like that. And so it's how it's viewed. It's easier to say that, depending on, like I say, who you are and your position. All the made up positions we've got as human beings of, the labels that we all say, this person's this person and that person's that person. None of it's true. We're all human beings. So, but it's just these hierarchies in the ego. And for you, when you're looking at your OCD, how would you have liked all this, all your bags to have been opened? How would you have preferred that?
I don't know. But I could have, and that's my honest answer, I don't know. I don't think, this should have happened or this should have happened. But I feel that if I'd have had therapy earlier, I might not have had as many years just trying to deal with the individual packets and getting nowhere, because dealing with the individual packets didn't get me anywhere, and those around me separated things into individual packets. So I, not knowing any better and not questioning and thinking that other people know better than me, I went along with that and I bought into that. So I took on those labels, those diagnoses, as that, I'm here to talk about my eating disorder. I can't talk about that. I can't talk about that.
What did the labels do for you then?
They have been an opening to getting support, because I meet a certain criteria. So I've been open to being referred to various services. In some situations, they've stopped me getting help because I don't meet certain criteria or because I've got a certain label. In some ways, I guess, I don't know, in some ways they have been helpful in that I've, in the early stages and not understanding and just rather say, it's me being stupid, by having a label or a diagnosis, I can say, well, if I came across somebody who had that label, I wouldn't go, you're being stupid. So I can't call myself stupid, if that makes sense.
But you did.
Yeah. Yeah, I was still stupid.
Yeah.
Even though I had the labels, I was just stupid. It's like, no, I don't think I fit that criteria and stuff. It's been weird because I guess I've got so many labels. I don't actually. I don't know. I want to say that I don't attach myself to the labels, but I have to do to fit into society. For like when you're filling forms in, and even when I remember one of the labels that I was given, I actually asked for, and I was filling in an online form for something, and it had to put about your mental health issues, and it's like when I asked my psychiatrist how to describe it, it was like long-term debilitating impact stemming from childhood trauma, and I'm like, there isn't a drop-down box for that. And it's like, I need to know, have I got this disorder, or this disorder? Because that's what the drop-down boxes are that I have to tick for. And so labels are needed to be able to fit into society. I can't even remember what the form was about or something. I think it was some kind of insurance or something. But I needed the label to be able to to be able to fill a form in.
Yeah.
And if I'd have put all that responsive to childhood trauma, they'd have gone, what? Shall I put that in other? It would only let me tick certain boxes and that kind of thing. And I think society is easy for labels because we have centres for this, that and the other, but we don't have holistic centres, do we? That deal with us all.
Yeah, we do, but not as readily available.
Yeah.
As everything else.
Yeah.
We have to end now.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.